What does it take to change the most dangerous man alive? Not threats, not money, not power. One woman, one night, one child he never knew existed. She thought he would destroy her world. Instead, he rebuilt it, and himself, from nothing. On this channel, we believe the most powerful stories aren't about crime or wealth. They're about what happens inside a person when love forces them to become something better. Mafia bosses, secret pregnancies, broken families, finding their way back to each other. That's what we do here. What this story teaches us, the bravest thing a person can do is choose to become someone their child can be proud of. If this moved you even slightly, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.
Natalie had always known how to survive in New York by staying invisible. But tonight, working as a server at the exclusive Metropolitan Club, her luck was about to run out. The party was for the kind of people who valued secrecy over anything else. She had been working these events for 6 months since her other jobs could not pay the bills. The money was great, and nobody knew who she was. In a city of 8 million, being anonymous was a skill. She moved expertly through men in suits that cost more than her rent. The club screamed old money, making her feel small and poor. Table 12 was in a dark corner. The men there were tense and watchful, the kind who carried guns. And in the center sat him. He was maybe in his early 30s, with dark hair and sharp, calculating eyes. When he looked up at her, the room went silent. She served the drinks, her heart pounding. He asked for only one thing. Your name. His voice was quiet, but carried immense power. Natalie, she answered, before she could stop herself. I am Adrian, he said, testing the sound of her name. He held her there with just his gaze, making it impossible to leave. Then he asked a strange, personal question. What does someone like you dream about? She tried to make a joke, but his next word hit her like a stone. Liar. It was not an insult, but an invitation. As she walked away, his voice followed her with a simple promise. I will see you again, Natalie. For the rest of the night, she felt his eyes on her. It should have been scary, but instead, it felt like being truly seen for the first time. Later, her boss gave her a message. The VIP wants to see you, the one who owns the building. The elevator opened to a stunning penthouse. Adrian stood waiting for her with 2 glasses poured. You came, he said. You asked for me, she replied, staying near the door. He moved toward her with a dangerous grace. He was even more intense up close. You are afraid of me, he stated. Should I be? She asked. Probably, he answered with startling honesty. Then he revealed that he knew everything about her. Her jobs, her online degree, the money she sent to her mother. It was terrifying. I wanted to be sure you were real, he explained. Not another person trying to use me. In my world, everyone has an angle. He confessed that everyone around him wanted power or money. But you, he said, you just saw a man who needed a drink. And then came the truth. I am not a good man, Natalie. I built an empire that runs on loyalty and blood. He admitted that for the first time in a decade, he saw something he wanted more than power. The smart thing was to run. But instead, she said, one drink. Their conversation lasted deep into the night. He was not what she expected, a man driven by a different kind of hunger. He admitted he was dangerous, but promised he was not a threat to her. He asked her to stay, and against all reason, she did. She awoke in his bed, peaceful for a moment before panic set in. This was a powerful, dangerous stranger. Natalie rushed out of the apartment. Her phone lit up with an urgent message from her friend Marcus. The news from Marcus was devastating. Adrian was the head of the Caruso crime family. The city lived in fear of him. For the next 2 weeks, Natalie hid, terrified he would find her. Then came the constant fatigue and nausea. A pregnancy test from a distant pharmacy confirmed her fears. 2 pink lines. She was having a mafia boss's baby. She decided to keep it, but never tell him. What happens when a woman carrying a criminal's child decides to run? Natalie knew Adrian would use their baby to control her, so she vanished. She found a tiny fourth-floor apartment in Queens and cut all ties, choosing a desperate, lonely freedom. This story is about the incredible strength of a mother protecting her child. Her old boss, Marcus, was worried. He said Adrian kept asking for her, but she lied and said she just needed a change. The hardest part was the loneliness that followed. She was completely on her own, attending every doctor's appointment by herself. She settled into a new, exhausting routine. Juggling 2 jobs, she barely made rent. Some nights, Natalie wondered what might have been if Adrian were a different man. But he was who he was, and she had to focus on keeping their baby safe. Then came the eviction notice. The landlord was selling the building, and she had 60 days to leave. Panic washed over her. With no savings and a baby on the way, she had no idea how she would find a new home. The world felt like it was collapsing. The next few weeks were a blur of desperation. She skipped meals to save money and walked miles between her jobs. 14 landlords turned her down. She was dizzy and weak, running herself into the ground, until one day, everything went dark. She woke up on the floor with her manager, Rita, hovering over her. At a clinic, the truth came out. She was severely malnourished. Rita took her home and saw the eviction notice. Then, a surprise. Rita said she had a cousin who could help, offering a room with no questions asked. Alone and pregnant, Natalie faced eviction. She finally broke down during a late work shift. Sobbing in a bathroom stall, her hand rested on her belly. A shadow fell across the door, and a man from her past spoke her name. She opened the door to find Adrian Caruso. He saw her pregnant belly with absolute shock. "Is it mine?" he demanded sharply. Tired of running, Natalie whispered a single word. "Yes." The admission hung between them as he stared, his expression unreadable. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked, his voice tight. Natalie explained she feared his dangerous world. He then noticed the dark circles under her eyes. "When did you last eat?" he asked softly. She snapped back, describing her desperate struggle to survive. Adrienne dismissed her fears, insisting he would protect his child. He stated she was coming with him immediately. "You can walk out or I can carry you," he said. She accused him of trying to control her, just as she had feared. He pleaded, "Let me care for you, just until you are stable." Defeated, Natalie agreed, but set strict conditions. He promised she could leave any time and would never take their baby. Finally, she accepted his hand. The ride to his stunning Tribeca penthouse was silent. The guest room was larger than her old apartment. Adrienne brought her a tray of food, insisting she eat before sleeping. "You are bossy," she said, but his voice was warm, not angry. Adrienne watched her eat from across the room. His stare should have felt invasive, but it was not. He asked quietly why she truly ran away. Natalie admitted she was scared, not just of him, but of what he represented. She confessed that Marcus revealing he was a crime boss shattered her fantasy. He insisted what they shared was real, but she could not see past his world of violence. She wanted a normal, safe life for their child. Adrian's voice was firm. He promised their child would never live in fear. He explained that he protects people the police cannot. She accused him of being a predator himself. He agreed that sometimes protecting people requires getting your hands dirty, but he had rules: no drugs, no trafficking, and no harming innocents. She stared at him, trying to see the gentle man she knew inside the crime boss. Natalie had to ask if he killed people. His simple yes was chillingly honest. He added that now he has others for that. He expected her to be terrified, but she was not. Logic told her to escape, to protect her child from him. Instead, a strange sense of safety washed over her. She finally admitted she did not know how to feel about him. He told her to rest. As he left, she quietly thanked him for finding her. He smiled, thanking her for staying. Alone in the luxurious room, she should have been afraid. For the first time in months, she slept soundly. Morning came, and she found him in the kitchen making breakfast. The sight of him cooking was surprisingly normal. "You cook?" she asked from the doorway. He smiled, saying a man has to eat. He served her the best breakfast she had eaten in a long time. She ate quickly, her body desperate for the food. "What happens now?" she asked. He told her about a doctor's appointment he had already scheduled with the best obstetrician in the city. When she worried about the cost, he insisted on paying. His tone made it clear there was no room for discussion. Natalie said she needed to call work, but he had already handled it. Her frustration turned to anger. "You had no right," she snapped. He apologized immediately, explaining that he was used to solving problems efficiently and had not considered her feelings. The genuine apology calmed her down. She explained her need for some control over her own life. He understood. She wanted to get her things from her old apartment, but he insisted on hiring movers. He pointed out she was 6 months pregnant and should not be lifting boxes. At the apartment in Queens, his disapproval was obvious. He called the place a death trap, listing the safety hazards from the wiring to the ceiling. "Not all of us live in penthouses," she retorted. He immediately softened, saying she deserved to be somewhere safe. Natalie's fight left her as she sank onto the worn couch. "No, you are right," she admitted. "This place is terrible." She told him everything, the fear, the hunger, the exhaustion. He listened, then apologized. "I never thought about how my reputation would affect you." He swore to protect her and the baby. "Anyone who touches my family dies slowly. Believe me when I say no one will hurt you." She wanted to believe this dangerous man could keep her safe. The doctor's office was top of the line. Adrian held her hand during the ultrasound. On the screen, they saw their baby. "Everything looks perfect," the doctor said. "You are about 26 weeks." Adrian asked if they could know the gender. They both nodded. "It is a boy." He had tears running down his face. "A boy," he whispered. "We are having a boy." At lunch, he found them a table at a place that was always booked. He asked her what she truly wanted. "For our son to be safe," she said. "And for you? I want someone who sees me, not just the mother of your child. I want to feel like I matter. You have never been invisible to me," he said, "and that terrifies me." "My world is dangerous," Adrian said, "but I can keep you safe. You get everything I have, no strings attached." "And if I want you?" she asked. "You can have me too," he replied, "on your terms." He then explained why he had searched for her. "You made me want to be a better man." "I failed you," he admitted, covering her hand with his. "You ran from me because I am a monster." "You are not a monster," she said. "I am asking for a chance to prove I can be what you need." She laced her fingers through his. "I am scared." He was too. "Maybe we can be terrified together," he said. It was honest, and that was enough. Life settled into a routine. She saw both sides of him, the dangerous and the gentle. He supported her dreams. She realized she was falling for the complicated man he was. The feeling felt inevitable. One night at dinner, his phone buzzed. His entire mood shifted. "I need to take this," he said, disappearing into his office. A sharp, angry phone call from the other room interrupted them. Adrian emerged 20 minutes later, his expression like stone. She insisted on knowing what was wrong. He explained that a rival made a move on one of his operations. He had to remind them why that was a terrible idea. "This is my world, Natalie," he said. "Problems and solutions." She did not ask for a clean life, only an honest one. He turned to face her, his eyes intense. He told her there are people who would hurt her to get to him. "They see you and our child as a weakness," he said, "and every one of them knows that touching you means death." He asked if she wanted details. She only wanted to know what would happen if someone came for them. "They die slowly," he said without hesitation. A strange satisfaction grew inside her. This dangerous man would burn down the world to keep them safe. "Okay," she said. 6 months later, he swore to protect them. Leaving the doctor's office after seeing their son on an ultrasound, Adrian's mood suddenly changed. He spotted a threat. A dark car parked across the street. "Get in the car," he said quietly, his voice hard. He pushed her toward his driver. Natalie watched from the window as he walked calmly to confront two imposing men. She waited at home, terrified, for 2 very long hours. He returned with bloody knuckles and a stained shirt. The blood was not his. She felt a wave of relief that made her knees weak. She asked what happened. He poured a whiskey and drank it fast. He said the Vulov family, a Russian crew, had sent a message. They had been trying to take his territory. Today, they showed him they could get to her. He explained they were not there to harm her, but to prove a point. His jaw was clenched with anger. He told her it was a mistake they would only make once. She saw the cold violence in his eyes when he said he made it clear she and their son were off limits. He told her the Russians would understand once they found what he left for them. He apologized for her having to see him that way. Instead of being afraid, she took his glass. She asked if they were safe now, and he promised they were. He pulled her into a gentle embrace. He swore no one would ever touch her again. She believed him, and that was the scariest part of all. That night, sleep did not come easily. She knew the Vulovs found her at the doctor's office. They had been watching her. She wondered who else knew where she was. She woke up shaking from nightmares to find Adrian in a chair by her window. He said he had been there for a few hours because she was having bad dreams. He sat on the bed and asked if she wanted to talk. She said no. He gently tucked her hair behind her ear. He promised to increase security and have a guard with her whenever she left. He was also upgrading the building's cameras and locks. He said it had to be enough. He admitted he could not lose her or their son. The honest confession hung in the air. She took his hand and told him she was scared. He admitted he was scared too. He feared he had dragged her into his war. He worried that loving him would get her killed. He was terrified their son would grow up without a mother. He said she was right to have run from him because his world was dangerous. She told him to stop protecting her from the truth and help her understand it. Adrian explained the city's delicate power balance. He said the Volkovs were a new, ambitious crew who ignored the rules. They saw Natalie as his vulnerability, and he confirmed she was. By threatening her, they had just declared their own destruction. He told her the war was to remove a cancer, but she was the reason he was finally acting. She made him promise that for their son, he would step away from the violence once it was all over and build something better. He agreed to transition to legitimate businesses for their family. They professed their love. 2 days later, the war began. Their home became a secure fortress, and Adrian was consumed by the fight, returning exhausted each night. He assured her they were winning with surgical precision. But the fear was real. He made her promise to take their son and disappear if he was killed, using accounts and properties he had already set up for them. They talked of a peaceful trip after the war. Then one day, Adrian announced it was over. Viktor Volkov surrendered. Natalie felt overwhelming relief, but it was quickly followed by a cold suspicion. She had to know what he did. He confessed he had taken Viktor's innocent brother Dmitri as leverage. He swore the man was returned unharmed. Natalie was conflicted, grateful to be safe, but frightened by the cold calculation her child's father was capable of. She believed she could handle the things he had done. He admitted that he had to separate his feelings from his actions to survive. But with her, he felt everything. He confessed that she made him want to be a better man, which was terrifying. She stood beside him, looking out at the city. She said their son would learn from his example. He promised to teach their son to be better than him, to build things instead of destroying them. He looked at her and said he would start building legitimate businesses for their son to inherit. He said it would take years, but he would start today. He turned to her and confessed his love for her and for the man he was with her. He said that was worth more than any empire. His vulnerability broke down her final walls. She told him she loved him too, even when he scared her. They held each other as the baby kicked. Adrian laughed and pressed his hand to her belly. He proudly said their son was strong and stubborn. He knelt and spoke to their unborn child, promising he was safe now. Watching them, Natalie knew this messy, complicated life was theirs. She was done running. Their peace lasted only 5 days. While organizing tiny clothes in the nursery, she heard angry voices. Adrian was arguing with a man she did not recognize. The man said the commission wanted a meeting about the Vulov situation. He said Adrian could not refuse. The man's cold eyes glanced at Natalie. He told Adrian to bring her if he was worried, but he had to attend. Natalie asked who the man was. Adrian said he was no one important, but his jaw was tense. The man introduced himself as Antonio Marches, a member of the commission overseeing their operations. Antonio's smile was cold. He said she must be the reason Adrian went to war. She replied that she was the mother of his child. Antonio told Adrian the meeting was tomorrow night, then left. The silence was heavy. Natalie asked what it was about. Adrian explained it was politics. The commission was concerned he acted alone against the Vulovs. She asked if he did, and he admitted he had good reason. He said they would likely try to penalize him, but it was just for show. He insisted it was not dangerous, calling it bureaucracy with higher stakes. Still, his tone made her nervous. She asked if she could go with him. He said absolutely not. She argued that she was his family and wanted to be there. She was tired of being hidden from his world. She needed to see all of it if they were going to be together. He finally agreed, but told her to stay close and not speak unless spoken to. The meeting was in a restaurant in Little Italy that was closed for the night. Adrian helped a pregnant Natalie into a room of 5 men who sat like judges. Antonio Marches gestured for them to sit. Adrian said he understood they had concerns. A man with a Brooklyn accent corrected him, saying he started a war without their approval. Adrian stated the Vulovs had threatened his family, which was more important than protocol. But Marches suggested he just wanted to remove his competition. Adrian argued the Vulovs were a problem for everyone. When accused of threatening an innocent civilian, he insisted he used minimal force, and the man was unharmed. The man from Brooklyn delivered the verdict, a $5 million fine, and he had to give up the Brooklyn ports. Adrian refused. The ports were his. He had built them himself. They told him he should have gotten authorization first. He replied that if the commission had a problem with him protecting his family, their priorities were wrong. The room grew cold. Marches warned him that he was on a dangerous path. Adrian stood, telling them he would pay the fine, but the ports remained his. If not, they could consider him outside their control. Marches gave a cold smile, agreeing for now, but warned him he was out of chances. In the car, Adrian confessed that his defiance had made him either very powerful or very vulnerable. He explained he did it to protect her, because the ports funded their security. Without them, he was weak, and weakness in their world was a death sentence. Natalie took his hand, promising they would face what was coming together. He worried he was dragging her down, but she insisted it was her choice. He held her, terrified of failing her and their unborn son. She told him to build something better, to start moving to legitimate businesses that very night. He agreed. The change began the next morning. Natalie found Adrian in his office, finishing a 3-hour call with his lawyer in Milan. He explained he was buying a completely legitimate shipping company. It was the first step. He hung up the phone and told her about the plan. She came over to his desk while he spoke, listening as he laid out the future he was trying to build for them. He looked exhausted but determined. He continued, explaining that he was also selling 3 of his more questionable businesses. The money would go into real estate. Within a year, 70% of his income would be legal. In 5 years, he wanted to be completely clean. He said his power was built on fear, which only works when you are the strongest. Legitimate businesses had protections his current empire did not. He looked at her, tired. Natalie asked how he was feeling. She was 8 months pregnant and tired herself. "Just 4 more weeks," she said. The reality of it made her ask if he was scared. He admitted he was terrified. He had no idea how to be a father. It was the first time he had ever spoken of his family. Natalie asked what his own father was like. Adrian was quiet, then said the man was cruel and violent. He had watched his father beat a man to death at 12. At 14, his father turned that violence on him. So at 21, Adrian killed him and took over his operations. He confessed that he swore he would never be like him, but sometimes he saw his father's eyes in the mirror. Natalie told him he was nothing like that man. Bad fathers, she said, do not worry about being bad fathers. He held her close, saying he loved her and their son more than anything. She said she loved him too. And in that moment, they chose to build a new life, trusting that love could change everything. The peaceful morning shattered when Adrienne's phone rang. When Natalie entered the kitchen, she found Marcus with a serious look on his face. He told her a man had been asking questions about her, the baby, and Mr. Caruso. Marcus showed her photos from security cameras of a man she had never seen before. He explained that this person was a professional, skilled at avoiding being seen. Natalie instinctively placed a hand on her stomach. Marcus admitted he had not told Adrienne yet, wanting to warn her first because Adrienne would want a complete lockdown. Natalie understood they could not hide in the building forever. Marcus said he would inform Adrienne now and warned her to be prepared for his intense reaction. Adrienne's response was swift and absolute. Natalie was forbidden from leaving the penthouse. She argued, explaining she had a doctor's appointment. Adrienne dismissed her concern, saying he would have the doctor come to them. Natalie felt like a prisoner, but Adrienne insisted he was just trying to keep her safe. He explained that someone was watching her, planning something, and he could not risk her safety. The genuine fear in his eyes was undeniable. She saw he was not just being controlling, he was truly terrified of losing her. Reluctantly, she agreed to his terms for just 2 weeks. "You have 2 weeks to figure this out," she finally said. He agreed, a wave of relief on his face. The next day, Dr. Chen's house call confirmed their baby was healthy and would arrive in 3 to 4 weeks. Natalie was overwhelmed with a mix of excitement and terror. She later found Adrienne in the nursery, looking just as scared as she felt. "What if I am terrible at this?" she asked, standing beside him. He put his arm around her. "We will figure it out together." Then his mood darkened. "I found him." The man was a private investigator hired by Antonio Marches. "He wants to know if you are a weakness he can use against me," Adrienne said in a deadly calm voice. "I am not going to kill him," Adrienne stated. "I am going to ruin him." He explained that by Monday, Marches would lose his fortune and face federal charges. The plan was already underway. Natalie felt a surge of satisfaction. "We are going to the Hamptons," he announced. "We will disappear there until after the baby is born." By the next day, they were in an armored car, heading out of the city with a full security team. The house in the Hamptons was a beautiful, modern fortress overlooking the ocean. "It was my father's," Adrian said, wrapping his arms around her on the deck. "Now I am glad I kept it." He imagined their son growing up there, safe and happy. They settled into an unexpectedly peaceful routine. That illusion of normalcy shattered with a phone call one morning. "The penthouse was hit last night," Adrian said, his face pale. "It was a professional crew, and it was a message." His voice was urgent. "I am moving you to the safe room. They might find this place next." Being led to a secure bunker by 4 guards felt completely unreal to Natalie. Adrian explained he had to go back to the city to deal with the threat personally. He made her promise not to open the door for anyone but him. Just before leaving, he kissed her and said he loved them both. Then he was gone. The hours passed slowly as Natalie was consumed by fear. Marcus gave her only brief updates, saying Mr. Caruso was handling things. But when nightfall came and Adrian had not returned, her worry turned into panic. Then, the secure phone inside the bunker rang, and Marcus's expression became unreadable. Marcus finally admitted that Adrian had been delayed. There was a confrontation, and the situation was more complex than they first thought. The attackers were not who they expected. It was an entirely new enemy. Natalie's anxiety grew with each passing hour. Midnight came and went. Finally, at 3:30 in the morning, the door opened. Adrian walked in, looking like he had survived a battle. His shirt was torn and there was blood on his hands. He told her he had found the people targeting them. He explained that it was not about business or territory. This was personal. His cousin sought revenge for 12 years and finally made his move. I had no choice but to kill him. Am I becoming my father? Natalie promised I was not. The blood feud is over. We are safe. He promised an end to the wars. As they watched the sun rise, the baby kicked. Then her water broke, 2 weeks early. In a sudden panic, they rushed toward the hospital. Labor was a blur of pain, with Adrian by her side. Soon, she heard the cry of their newborn son. They held the tiny boy, and for a moment the world was filled with perfect joy. That joy was shattered by a security guard. He warned that people claiming to be family were in the lobby. Adrian knew it was a trap. The doctor gave them 20 minutes to get out. With their newborn son sleeping on her chest, Natalie asked Adrian who was downstairs. His voice was ice. Antonio Marchus, from the commission. He brought men. They claim commission authority. To stop them, Adrian needed Natalie to do the impossible. He asked the exhausted new mother to go downstairs and publicly state she was there by choice. Adrienne explained this was the only way to stop them from claiming she was coerced. Looking at her son, Natalie found a new strength and agreed. They went down to the chaotic lobby. Marches immediately confronted them, claiming Natalie was being held against her will and leaving against medical advice. Adrienne simply let him talk. Natalie, summoning all her energy, spoke clearly. I am here by choice and I am leaving by choice. She looked Marches in the eye. If you or the commission ever approach my son or me again, I will file harassment charges and go to the media. Adrian then stepped in, his voice deadly. You crossed a line when you involved my family. Get out. Marches, seeing the look in Adrian's eyes, finally backed down and left. Can we go home now? Natalie asked, her voice shaking. The drive back was a blur. She had given birth and confronted a mob boss all in one day, but she felt stronger, not broken. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, she told Adrienne. At the penthouse, the chaos of the first night of parenthood began. A few days later, Dr. Chen gave both mother and baby a clean bill of health, joking that Natalie should avoid confronting mob bosses for a while. Later, Natalie found Adrian holding their son. We need to name him, she said. Adrienne suggested James Brooks Caruso, wanting the baby to have both their names. It felt perfect. Their peace lasted 6 days. Marcus burst in with bad news. The commission was filing a lawsuit, claiming Adrian had intimidated Natalie at the hospital. They had witnesses. It gets worse, Marcus said. Someone leaked the story to the press. By tonight, everyone would see the story of a mob boss and his captive girlfriend. This is a public trap, Adrian explained. To prove our family is legitimate, he knelt down. Marry me, he said, not as a solution, but because I love you. Looking at their son, Natalie said yes. Adrian looked at her and said, marry me. He explained it was the perfect way to fight back against their enemies in public. They would announce their engagement immediately to control the story. Within 2 hours, they had a press release. Natalie added her own statement, making it clear this was her choice and their family was built on love. The news changed everything. The story was no longer about a woman held captive, but about an unexpected love story. The legal attacks against them stopped. A week later, Natalie watched the news and said, You won. Adrian smiled. No, we won. Now, they could finally build the life they always wanted. He held her, confirming his promise to leave the family business for good. He explained that extricating himself would take 3 to 5 years, but he was moving fast. Then he revealed his true plan, a foundation to give kids from troubled backgrounds a real chance. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. It was perfect. He told her she was his inspiration, the reason he wanted to be a man their son could admire. She reminded him he already was. He had chosen to change because she gave him a reason. They held each other, two complicated people finally at peace, ready to face the future together. 3 months later, they married at their home in the Hamptons. It was a private ceremony for the people who mattered most. Dr. Chen was there, as was Rita from the grocery store. Adrian's few trusted associates attended, but the commission respectfully stayed away. He promised to protect her, to honor her, and to choose her every day. She promised to choose him and the family they were building together. When they kissed, their baby son James made a noise of approval, and all the tension of their past finally disappeared. The small reception was perfect as they danced on the deck while the sun went down. Life was not simple, but it was real. The next year brought challenges, from sleepless nights with a colicky baby to the lingering shadows of Adrian's old life. But it also brought moments of pure joy, like James's first steps. Natalie watched Adrian transform from a dangerous man into a doting father who read bedtime stories. His foundation launched on their son's first birthday, and he poured all his energy into helping others. He admitted he never thought he could be a man who builds things up instead of tearing them down. Natalie simply told him he just needed the right reason. One night, after their 2-year-old son was asleep, they reflected on their journey. They looked around their home, now filled with toys and family pictures, and felt a deep sense of pride. Natalie admitted there were times she almost ran, terrified by his world, but she never did. She chose to stay, to fight, and to believe they could build something better. He kissed her head, thanking her for seeing the man beneath the monster. She corrected him, saying he was never a monster, just a man who did what he had to survive. Now, he was a man doing beautiful things to thrive. 5 years after they first met, Natalie stood in the office of her own successful firm. A photo on her desk showed Adrian and their son, James, laughing on a beach. Her phone buzzed with a text from her husband asking her to pick up their son from school. It was a simple, normal life, the exact thing she had once dreamed of. Later, as they sat around the dinner table, James excitedly told his father about getting a gold star in reading. Watching them, Natalie felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This was the journey, and it was the best one. After putting James to bed, Adrian quietly suggested they think about having another child. He turned to her and asked what she thought. Natalie considered the wonderful chaos a second baby would bring and smiled. She agreed, but said this time they should plan for it. He pulled her close, kissing her with a love deepened by years of trust. He thanked her for giving him a life worth living and for showing him how to build instead of destroy. She smiled, telling him they had saved each other. Together, they had carved out something precious, a family built on love and choice. Natalie's life began with nothing but fear. She was pregnant, alone, and working constantly while hiding from a man she believed was a monster. But her fear eventually became strength, and the monster was just a man who needed her. Now her life was full, built with a loving husband, a safe son, and a career she earned herself. "Time for bed," Adrian said softly, taking her hand. "James is going to want pancakes at 6 in the morning." Natalie smiled. As she fell asleep in Adrian's arms, she thought of that terrified girl she once was, and the incredible journey ahead of her. That girl would never have believed this future was possible. Natalie had learned that the most beautiful stories do not come from easy lives. They are born from people who choose to fight, who turn fear into power, and who build a family from the pieces of a broken past. Her life was proof of that. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.